Hi, everybody. I hope you're having a good week. I hope that you got the announcement in plenty of time to let you know that our on-campus class for 4-9 has actually been moved to online. Our family is passing around a yucky stomach virus, and I knew that none of you want what I have right now, so I thought I would just go ahead and move class online so that none of you get sick. No viruses are much better than a virus. What you're going to be completing this weekend, if you haven't already done so, is going through chapters 5 through 8 in your interactions textbook, watching a fantastic video on whole brain teaching. I like this video for 100 reasons, but if we just wanted to list the top three. She has some fantastic teaching, practice, and engagement strategies. She uses all kinds of different ways to engage learners that can be used across settings and for all students. And the way that she gets students engaged in thinking about what they already knew, their prior knowledge or their schema, and what they're learning today, and using a lot of movement and imagery, engagement by using students' names in the problems that they're solving. All those strategies are fantastic ways to engage learners. So I hope that you will like it as much as I do. In Check Your Understanding, it mentions a discussion board. My apologies, there is no discussion board this week. What you do have is a reading guide 6 where you're answering those activities in the end of the chapters, and you're going to be finishing up another case study and the in-class activity that I will describe for you in just a second. So my apologies for the error. I will remove that later on. Alrighty, we are starting with our in-class activity just to give you an overview of what we're going to be doing in this video. The assignment that you're going to work on today, and that is due at the end of this module, is to create a top 10 list based on the information that I'm going to point out in this video. All of the information that I'm going to show you in this video is hyperlinked in your assignment, and your top 10 list needs to include at least one item from each of the 4 points above. So you might choose the Ohio Department of Education's website as your favorite, and you might have 3 or 4 tips from there. That's fine. You just need to make sure that you also have one tip from the Ocali resources, one tip from the lesson plan handbook or the other KDE website information, and one tip from Wright's Law. You can mix up the number 2, 2, 2, and 3, however you want to do it to get to 10 total points, and make sure you've got one from each section. I've also gone through the Ohio IEP form and made some notes that I'm going to cover in this the video supports for today. So you're welcome to reference that also if you'd like in your top 10 list. The last part of your assignment after you do your top 10 list is just to ask any questions that you still have about IEP writing. I'm going to take all the questions that you ask and compile them together, and then I'll create another short video that gives you answers to all the questions that you ask. So if you've got questions, please ask them. I'm always happy to answer them. I'm going to be working on grading this weekend, so you'll be getting feedback on your last module, hopefully before the end of Sunday. So with no further ado, let's take a walk through some of these resources. I'm going to start with the Ohio IEP form and just some basic notes that I made that I thought might be helpful to you when we're looking at best practices and writing IEPs. And again, this is hyperlinked in that document. So it's just an annotated IEP, and I don't have information in every section, but you know as a practitioner that you're going to fill in and check the boxes for every single section. So if this is an initial IEP and annual review, you'll fill in all the dates, all the check marks that you are completing. So when you're looking at your student and you're looking at future planning, you definitely want to talk with all students about what their plans are for the future and what their family's plans are for the future, and how those future plans are impacted or affected by the areas in which they qualify for an IEP. If you check any of these boxes for the special instructional factors, then know that you also need to address those factors within the course of the IEP. So if you check yes to behavior, then you definitely want to address that throughout the course of the IEP. Keep in mind that this question about behavior does not mean that this child has to be cursing or throwing temper tantrums in class. If a child has ADHD and is distracted throughout the day, that behavior affects their learning. If a child has significant cognitive issues or delays, and people sometimes will say, I don't want to check that factor because the student didn't mean to hit me or didn't know what he was doing. If a student has behaviors that affect anyone else's learning, so if they're screaming in class, if they're pulling hair, any of those things, whether the student we feel like has a cognitive ability to understand that behavior, it's still impeding someone's learning, so we're going to check yes on that section. So make sure, again, to answer every question. You don't want to, answer yes here, no here, skip 2 questions, and then answer this one. It just makes people wonder, well, what happened? Why didn't you complete the IEP? So, if they do not have a visual impairment or are blind, you check no. Check along the way, make sure you fill everything out. When you're looking at section 3, this should be a comprehensive profile, and the notes that I've got here for you are just reminders, and I'm sure you all know these as great practitioners. But the child's profile has to address strengths and deficits, and make sure that you're not forgetting those strengths. This section should really be an opportunity for us to acknowledge where our students are doing well, and that should occur within each area of eligibility. So there should never be a time when we're listing deficit statements about a child that we haven't listed strengths. When you say, wow, this student is 5 grade levels behind or 8 grade levels behind, what we talk about a lot of times are areas of relative strength. And I would use that term, relative strength. I'll put that in the notes here. So what do I mean by that? I would say things like this about my son, Dan, and we've talked about Dan. Dan's nonverbal and has significant cognitive deficits. So we'll say things like, Dan is currently at a pre-reading stage. His relative strengths in reading are an enjoyment of listening to poetry read out loud that is rhythmic, enjoying books set to music, and he enjoys listening to peers read to him short passages of less than 3 minutes. Those are relative strengths for Dan in the area of reading comprehension. So address relative strengths. Don't ever ignore that factor altogether. And you definitely need to address deficits. And those sections should be data driven. We should never look at a section in IEP that has no numbers. You should always have current data in your IEP, and I would always state that data in positive terms. So an example would be, John can't read any words. Well, first of all, this statement is rarely factual. If they say he refused, anything that's an absolute is really hard to prove. I would instead say, John currently is able to read 3 words with 50% accuracy, and then in parentheses I put those 3 words, John, go, and read. This data in the present levels, I always think of this as, if I am sending to my student, whom I'm going to think of as my baby, if I'm sending my student, my baby, to another teacher, I want that teacher to have every tool possible to know how to best support that student the second the student walks in the door. So if my child's profile is written that way, then when a teacher reads that, they're going to be able to say, wow, given the date that this IEP was written, here's everything that this child is able to do. I can pick up the ball and run. The child's profile should not list the names of exact programs. If this child does well in Read 180 or in Orton Gillingham. Instead, you want to talk about the type of program it is. So with Orton Gillingham, I might say hands-on phonics-based instruction. You also want to include at the end of either each section for areas of eligibility or at the end of the entire profile an impact statement that says something like, John's current performance and areas of deficit in the areas of, and then list those areas of eligibility, impact his ability to access the general curriculum. All right, I'm going to skip post-secondary transition, but again, know that if you've got a student that is 14 years and older, or if you have a student who's younger, but you know is going to need significant supports, like Dan would be a great example, I would start looking at post-secondary transition at a very early age, because we know that students with significant disabilities, most of the services that are available, they're limited and have long waiting lists. So I would want to start talking to parents in preschool about putting students on waiting lists for eligible services. All right, so scrolling down to the annual measurable goals. In this section where we've got this PLAF, or present levels, this is going to specifically address the strengths and weaknesses with data in the specific area of the goal. So for this section, you're going to want to go into as much detail, and I always think about, for every goal and or different specific objective that I'm writing, I want to have a data statement, so that when I'm talking about a student increasing their reading by 20%, up here I'm going to say the student's current reading level is 100 words per minute. That way I know what my target is going to be. There should never be any questions about what is this student doing, or what is this teacher trying to accomplish. It should be crystal clear. The goals should always move the student forward or toward mastery on whatever state instructional curriculum is currently at play. So you want to always look at that grade level equivalency for a student, and how can I move that student to get them as close to grade level as possible. I like this formula when I'm writing a goal. So you might have another formula you like better, but I use this almost exclusively to make sure I've got all the components I need in a goal. I always start with the word given, and then when I started writing IEPs, a friend said to me, you need to think of an IEP goal as if a student is sitting on a stage, and you should be able to visualize everything that's going on with that goal. And if you do that, that really helps me make sure I've not missed anything. So in the given part, it's everything the student will need to accomplish that goal, so that if I'm a new teacher coming in to work with a student, I know every material I need to gather in order to start this goal with this child. So it could be given a writing prompt and a graphic organizer, or given a stressful situation, or given a situation with peers, given a classroom academic activity, or given a set of 2-digit addition problems and a calculator. I would say John, or insert that student's name. Do not say student. Always give the actual name, will, and then whatever you're expecting them to do. So he's going to write 2 paragraphs on topic. He's going to keep his hands to himself. He's going to solve problems accurately. And then you want to include that measurement part. So it could be with 20% accuracy or 90% accuracy, or in 4 out of 5 measured occasions. By, and then you're going to list a date, and that date should be whenever the IEP is set to expire. You want to make sure that you're choosing the methods of measurement that you will be using for the goal. And then you want to make sure that when you're writing your objectives, that you have broken your goal down into smaller chunks that are reasonable and accomplishable, and they need to include dates for completion. Usually your dates should match the reporting periods, and keep in mind that federal law requires that students in special education report on progress of IEP goals at the same time that general education students get it. So every time a progress report goes home or a report card goes home, students should also be taking home reports on their IEP progress. Some ways you can scaffold objectives. Some of us are really good at breaking things down. If my goal was 90%, then I break it down into 20, 50, 70, 90. But there are other ways to scaffold goals. You could look at changing the location. So a student might start being successful in a stressful situation in a resource room with a teacher or with one other student. And then you're slowly building to a gen ed classroom, to less structured environments in the cafeteria and the gym. You can also vary the amount of support or prompting. So it could be that you're starting with full prompts, with partial prompts, with a point prompt, or a number of distance. You can also break this down by task analysis. You'll need to make sure you check the child's progress will be reported each time report cards are listed, but definitely you can report progress more often. Just know that whatever you check here means that you must do that. So it's, in my mind, always good to do more. But what I've checked here is the very minimum I can do. So if you check everything that, I'm going to email you, call you,